So, you may not think your kids are paying attention, but they are. They really are. About 2 years or so ago, one of my grandsons, when he was about 12 years old, he asked me how I became wealthy. And I gave him, like a high level answer. And I said, I serve a lot of people. And the more people you serve, the easier it is to create wealth for yourself. And I gave him an example of how, like, when you have a job as an employee, you're serving one person, your employer. But that company that you work for, it's serving thousands, maybe even millions of people, their customers. And that's why the company makes so much money and you don't, because you're not serving enough people. So that was my answer to him then. But recently he came back and asked me again, right? He's 14 now. And I could see that his question was more specific than it had been the first time, right? He was asking, so really, how can you become rich, right? How did you become wealthy? And so here's what I said. I said, you know what? When I was a kid, I used to think that wealth was about flashy cars and fancy houses and, stacks of cash. But over the years, I learned something that changed everything. You see, being wealthy is not about having a lot of money. It's really more about having enough money working for you so that you no longer have to work for money. In other words, having enough passive income coming in so that it can support your lifestyle. That's what wealth is to me. And so he says, so what do you mean, Papa, like investments? And I said, exactly. Wealth isn't built overnight. It's a long game. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? And it's about creating passive income. Money that just keeps coming in when you're not actively working. Think about it like you plant an orchard, a fruit orchard, right? You don't plant an apple tree today and then expect to go out and reap apples from that tree tomorrow. You realize that, okay, I planted the tree. Now I've got to nurture this tree. I've got to give it time to mature. And at some point, this tree is going to produce more apples than I could ever eat. As a matter of fact, I'll probably have enough apples that I could give apples to my neighbors and to my relatives. And I could sell apples too to strangers. I mean, that's what happens once you do that. And then you can take the seeds from that apple tree and you can start more trees. You see, that's how wealth grows. It works exactly the same way. But you got to start with that first seed. So he asked me, he says, okay, I kind of get that. So how do I get started? And I said, well, listen, what you want to do is you want to start small. Okay? Everybody starts small. Start learning about investing. Now, I can teach you a lot about investing because I am a professional investor and I teach people about investing. But you don't want to just learn from me only. You want to learn from all different sources. So even though you're young, start studying investing and become very knowledgeable in that space, because that's going to be the first step towards creating the wealth that you want. Okay? Now, he said, but what if I just want to have a good paying job? And just live comfortably. I said, well, there's certainly nothing wrong with that at all. If you just want a good paying job. As a matter of fact, that's the first step to creating wealth. See, you have to have a source of income if you're going to start to create wealth, because the way you're going to create your wealth is by setting aside a portion of the income that you have. We call this your savings, right? You're going to set that aside and say, this I don't touch. I won't spend this on anything else. This is my investment capital for my future. So you're going to need to have a job or some source of income. Otherwise, you'll never become wealthy. Okay? And so that's the first step. Now, once you get that first piece going, I suggest you save about 10% of your bring home pay. So, people say, should I use my gross pay before taxes or after taxes? Well, here's what I say to you. After taxes, I mean, you can't spend the money before taxes, right? So let's say you make $1,000, but after taxes, you get $800. So you look at the 800. What can you do with that 800? I say you take 10% of that and say, this is mine to keep, period. This is not for someone else. I'm not paying a bill with this. I'm not going to spend this on groceries. This is mine to keep. And so that's your savings. And I'm saying 10%. So in that example, $80, right? You take that and put that aside. That's step one. And then you learn how to put that $80 to work and have that money start to make money for you. Okay? Because otherwise, what's going to happen is, yeah, you have a good job, and yeah, you're living a decent life, but what if you get sick? Or what if you can't work for some reason? Or what if the company shuts down? There's so many things that can happen, right? What if there's a deep, deep recession and your business, your company goes out of business? These things happen, guys. These are actual things that happen in life every day. So you have to have a plan B. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, when I was in my 20s, I really thought I had financially figured things out, because at 22 years old, I had already owned a business for like 3 years. I had a store where we sold music, right? It was called a record store way back in the day. And my record store was doing really, really well, because it was during the disco age and people were buying records like crazy, and I was making a lot of money. Plus, my wife had a job and we had really good income. So I just thought, man, I figured this thing out. We're going to be rich by the time I'm 30. Well, guess what? Something happened that I hadn't anticipated, and I didn't have a plan B. What happened was a large record store chain opened up a big record store right in my neighborhood. And literally, overnight, all my customers were going over there to buy their records. And all of a sudden, I wasn't making very much money at all. I couldn't survive even a full year after they opened. I went out of business, and I had to get a job for a while. Okay, so that's very, very disheartening. But it also taught me a lesson, and that is you got to have a plan B. If you don't have a plan B, then you're just being naive. Okay, you're being naive. You think everything's going to work out all the time for you. You think the job you have is going to last forever. You're just being naive. And so anyway, that's what I shared with him, guys. He says, that makes a lot of sense. I said, kid, that's wisdom. Okay, wisdom over the years, hard knocks. I learned a lot of lessons, and I'm happy to share them with you. And I hope that you'll embrace some of these lessons and take some of these lessons and put it to work in your life. And here's what I want to offer you. I want to say to you, look, continue to ask questions. Continue to ask questions. Ask questions of people that have what you want. You'll be surprised at how open people are when they see a sincerely interested person asking questions, especially a young person. For me personally, it warms my heart when a young person asks me, what can I do to achieve what you have achieved? See, I'm happy to share that. And I can tell you, my wealthy friends we talk about these things. We're happy to share that information. Happy to. There are no secrets. We just don't want to share it with people who just want to go blah, 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 but don't actually want to do anything. But, obviously, you're still young and you're trying to figure things out. So you're doing the right things. Ask questions. And I just thought I'd share this story with you guys here on YouTube and on social media, because I thought it was pretty impactful. And I felt really good about it. And I feel that you should understand that whatever you're doing, whether you're being successful, whether you're being just average, or even if you're being destructive, your kids, your grandkids, they're watching, guys. They're watching. So be aware. Be aware of the impact that you're having and the effect that you're having on your kids. All right. God bless you guys. I'm Desi Arnaz. I'll see you guys on the next video.